Welcome to Beyond the Barrel, the podcast where we discuss philosophy from a layperson's perspective, armed only with a stolen Netflix password. Thanks so much for joining us. In this episode, we talk about the popular NBC television series The Good Place and how it influenced popular conversation centered around philosophy and ethics, in particular, moral philosophy. We hope you enjoyed the show today. Morgan, my love for The Good Place is indescribable.
I mean, mine's enormous. That's how I'm going to describe it.
What is it that makes The Good Place so damn good?
Gosh, I'm so torn. There's so many things. The acting, the story, the emotions, the way that they keep us learning philosophy but laughing the whole way through it. Like, it's just tens across the board for me.
Right? Because it's not just in the scenes where he is physically standing up, Chidi, I'm referring to, who, if you haven't seen the show, Chidi is a moral philosophy and ethics professor who has died and gone to what he perceives to be heaven. And he is teaching Eleanor, who was not a good person, or a self-described bad person, medium person, I suppose, in the human life, in the before times, I suppose, and believes that she has been sent to the wrong place because she is not the good humanitarian person that everybody thinks that she is. So in order to have a chance at staying in this realm and not being discovered, Chidi, her prescribed soulmate, offers to teach her philosophy, or I guess gets cornered into teaching her philosophy. It's not just in these scenes where he's physically standing at a blackboard and talking about, the progression of Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, if I got that in the right order, and Kant and utilitarianism. It's in the way the show has its characters interact. It's in the way they develop. It's in the way that the plot progresses and drives them forward. Philosophy is truly written into the fabric of every scene.
Really, truly. And I like what you said about just how the characters interact with each other and with the philosophies that they learn and with this crazy afterlife world that the writers created. Their interactions make the story what it is.
It's these four characters, the aforementioned Chini and Eleanor, as well as Tahani, who is... How would you describe Tahani?
She's fabulous. It's hard to choose favorites, but I love her so much. She's just this rich woman who has beef with her sister because her parents love her more. So how she's behaved in her life is, she's done things that are objectively good, like donating, hundreds of thousands of dollars to charity, but she's done it out of spite for her sister because she's trying to get points with her parents, right? So that's how she's ended up in this, good place that's actually the bad place.
Oh yeah, that's the plot twist if you haven't seen the show.
Oh yeah, spoilers ahead. Spoilers ahead. We're going to assume that you've seen the show if you've listened this far already.
So the thing that's interesting about Tahani is that her prescribed soulmate, not the thing that's interesting about her, she is her whole character unto herself, but what's interesting about the dynamics that they're put in is a lot like Chidi and Eleanor being on completely different ends of the morality spectrum. Tahani and Jason is her prescribed soulmate. They're kind of flipped. Because Tahani is this rich, affluent person who does good things to gain social recognition and, like you said, spite her sister and impress her parents, while Jason is aspiring DJ from Jacksonville, Florida, who does objectively terrible things because he's not really smart enough to recognize that they're bad things. But what's interesting about their dynamic is that while he does objectively bad things and she does objectively good things, he's a better person than her.
Right, because his intentions are never self-centered, really. They are to a certain extent, but not in the way that Tahani's motivations are.
When she does something, she is thinking about the long-term effects on her status.
But Jason is like very in the moment, like, this is gonna be so
Mhm.
cool. He like throws Molotov cocktails at the drop of a hat.
Which one could argue is similar to the juxtaposition of, I guess it would be Kantianism, is how you would say that, and utilitarianism.
Mm-hmm.
Because utilitarianism, and this is a major theme throughout the show, is the idea that the ends justify the means. What's good for all is worth the sacrifice of one, while Kantian philosophy is way more about the intention behind actions. Am I
I
correct?
believe so, yeah. Because Kantianism is about the intentions behind the actions being good and the ends themselves being good. Whereas utilitarianism, which is what Kant argues against, yeah, I think you got it exactly right.
So you have the juxtaposition of these characters who are essentially in themselves different representations, or at least approaches to moral philosophy, which is really the heart of the show. And in their interactions with each other, what's truly brilliant about the show is, while on one hand they are studying the theories behind philosophy and the what it means to discuss it and read about it on paper, they are actively trying to apply it to their lives, and it's not easy. Most of the challenges of the show, aside from being in a cosmic demonic realm, is trying to take these moral ideas and apply them in a real world situation.
Exactly. And that's always been my struggle, like in the classroom learning philosophy, okay, but what do I do with this, right? How do I live my life with this? Which is something that we talk about sometimes on this podcast too, like how can I take this into my life and like create more peace and happiness for myself and everyone around me?
Exactly, what is the point? Yes, this is an interesting discussion, but how do we use this? How do we improve the world with this? And that's what we're here
Yeah,
for.
100%. The Good Place illustrates all of this like practical ethics so beautifully, right? Because it tests out all these theories. Like we were talking about the trolley problem when we were prepping for this episode, and like just how visual it is and how visceral to actually be there on the tracks pulling the levers. People are getting their bodies run over left and right.
Can you explain the trolley excuse me, the trolley pro
The
oh my
trolley
god,
program.
I give up. Can you explain it so for those who may not have heard it before?
So, what Mason here is referring to is the trolley problem. And so, the trolley problem is basically this moral dilemma of like, if you're on a trolley and you see you're headed toward 5 people who are on the tracks, is it ethical to pull that lever and redirect the trolley to the other side of the tracks where there's only one person instead? And there's all kinds of variations on this problem as well. What if you know the person who's on the tracks? What if the person's a doctor? What if all these people are children? You can mess with it however you want to. That's kind of what's fun about thought experiments is they can kind of spiral out of control.
Yeah, and they literally do in this
They
situation.
do. So yeah, as you can imagine, there's bodies flying. If you haven't seen this episode where they talk about the trolley problem, it's definitely worth a watch just because of how, like, I would say it's like slapstick comedy, but there's a little bit too much blood.
Like many things in The Good Place, it rides the line between fucking hilarious and that was too real.
Yeah.
So essentially, as they're discussing the trolley problem in their makeshift classroom, one of Chidi's students, who is an angel, a demon who is trying to turn good,
Hmm.
says essentially, well, why don't we try it out? And he snaps his fingers, and around them appears the actual trolley problem. Good God. With them on it, with Chidi forced to make that decision. And Chidi, who's so much of his character is his decision paralysis that has literally ruined his life and many of his relationships. He physically cannot make a choice, so he hits the 5 people. And I think that's such a beautiful illustration and bloody illustration of how difficult it is to apply these concepts of morality to actionable and real life situations, because they run it, 50 times, and I don't think Chidi makes a decision once.
No, I don't think so. Because that happens season 2 or something before he's made that character development at all.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, he gets
there. We love Chidi, but...
And it's very interesting to see. And for me, I've always kind of struggled with the moral question in this problem of, is it better to stand by and do nothing? Or is it better to make the decision that causes someone else to die?
Right. And that's a really important thing that the episode grapples with too, is like, what right does anyone have to play God in this situation? Right? To make the decision to assign value to individual people's lives, do you just tally up the bodies, or does one life have more value than another based on, certain criteria? And it just, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think they really decide that it's a fair problem for a human to try to solve, A recurring theme in their kind of structure of morality, at least as the characters develop their morality, they kind of come to this conclusion of, just trying your best is the best way to be moral, to just carefully consider things and then make the best decision you can with what you have. That's how you be moral, but you still have to do something.
You have to make an attempt, because things do get better for the characters, and they do experience character development as they are trying to apply these practices, even though they often fail to get the results that they hoped for.
They fail a lot. They really do. And I think that's a really important lesson when it comes to philosophy too, is because when you do study ethics and stuff, it all seems really rigid and if you deviate even a little bit, then you're hurting people and it's unethical, it's immoral, right? Whereas the view that they have in the show is a little more flexible and it's a little more personable to each individual's own experience and capabilities.
That's what the show does across the board beautifully, right? It's making it not only accessible in the way of, here's what this philosophical argument looks like, here's what this is called, here's how these philosophers approach these things. It's also a ongoing conversation of what these concepts look like and how they look different for each type of person, because Chidi and Eleanor and Dahani and Jason Mendoza are all very different personalities. They have their similarities, but they come from extremely different backgrounds, and they've had extremely different life experiences. And I think it speaks to a love of the layperson who wants to learn philosophy, that it's not only making it accessible, but it's saying anyone can experience this and try to apply it to their life. These systems aren't rigid. They aren't just for academics and PhDs. You don't have to conform to anyone's system of thought or break your brain to try to understand and incorporate these philosophical concepts.
Yeah, I really love that. Like how you said, it's like a love letter to the layperson, right? Who's trying to learn philosophy. I feel that way too. So speaking of making your brain break, was there anything in the show that you felt like was a little bit brain breaking for just the layperson?
Do you mean it's in terms of high concept, or humanity is hard and we have to deal with it?
Either one. I feel like both are welcome here.
I definitely fiercely related to Michael's existential crisis in season 2, when before he accepts and decides to try to become a better being and learn the systems of morality and these theories. he really goes through a lot of stages of grief and a lot of the different types of existentialism. I feel he definitely goes through the kind of happy-go-luckiness of absurdism and nihilism and all of the highs and lows that come with that. And this is when he's exposed to the concept of death. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
He now has stakes in his life. He can fail, and if he fails, his being will essentially be ripped out of his physical form, and he will not exist anymore. So once he has to deal with these concepts of death, that's when he has these existential crises and goes through a mid-afterlife crisis and essentially struggles with the idea that his actions matter now, or they don't matter. It's a hard question. Do they matter more because he can die, or do they matter less because he will one day not exist? So that I really related to, and so it broke my brain really hard because it made me think about those things for
Mm-hmm.
me. But in terms of philosophical concepts, the trolley problem was a really big one. It was very visceral. It was very visual. But there's also this overarching idea that no one is truly bad or good, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody deserves to be punished eternally, at least, for doing some bad things.
Yeah.
But also, people don't deserve to be lauded and held on an insanely high pedestal for doing a few good
Yeah.
things.
Like, because that's a huge part of the show is like the whole afterlife system. Like, before our gang of protagonists makes some changes in the afterlife scoring system is like this points-based system that's like impossible to navigate. Like, there's this guy who goes and buys a dozen roses for his mom. But then he gets negative points on his like afterlife score. So like points for him to go to the bad place basically because, these flowers were harvested in a place where like people are being enslaved to grow them, and he ordered it on his phone, which was made in a sweatshop, and then the flowers were delivered using carbon emitting, like it's just this whole trail of like negative consequences that really you can't do anything about at the individual level, and that most of the time you can't even see that far ahead. And so yeah, it does weigh a lot on the individual to think about all of these things. But I think the show does a really good job of addressing like, hey, as the individual, what matters is that you can improve and that you can try and that you can have good intentions, and that counts for something.
It really takes moral relativism to a cosmic scale, and while it makes all of our actions seem tiny, it also shows the larger impacts that they have, which is another huge theme of the show. Like you were saying, our improvement can cause more positive influences than we truly know at the
That
time.
too, that too. Yet at the same time though, I feel like it kind of toes moral relativism, right? Because I feel like moral relativism is a little more vague than what the show goes after. Because moral relativism, that's kind of where it feels like pretty much anything can be spun as a moral action just based on like your intentions and the specific circumstances. But with the show, there's still bad things. Like you can do something bad, you can make a choice that hurts people, and that's not cool. But with the show, you kind of just get a chance to have a do-over and try again and keep trying until you get it right. Whereas with moral relativism, it's like, there's not really any sense in trying again. You did the best you did, and that's what it is. And I don't know all that much about moral relativism, right? We're spitting it out there. I just think that the philosophy of the show is really special, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It really takes philosophy and puts it under a lens like nothing else I've ever
I
seen
think
before.
something really important about how they created the philosophy of the show is, I mean, they reference everyone who's ever done philosophy. And the one piece that they kind of made
Mhm.
famous was the essay "What We Owe Each Other" by Scanlon, I believe. I don't remember his first name, but that's kind of what the writer of the show, whose name I also don't remember.
It's Michael
Michael
Schur.
Schur. Yeah, that's one of the essays that Michael Schur really pulled a lot of inspiration from.
Well, that is a huge concept throughout the show, is a lot of moral philosophy is how do we ethically and responsibly interact with our peers, but not just our peers, everyone around us, everyone at all levels of society. What responsibility do we have to help them to improve things? And that really kind of plays into Chidi and Eleanor's whole arc of, is it ethical to help this person, or is it more ethical to let them
Man, the
fail?
question you just asked was like, that kind of shot me in the heart a little bit.
Well, how would you respond to that question if
Oh
asked?
gosh. I would say that it depends on the case.
As with everything.
Right. Because, like, it's good for people to fail and learn their own lessons. But at the same time, it's also good to help people, especially when they ask for your help. But I guess if you're assuming that someone wants your help and is going to accept your help, then that's kind of where you get into some moral grayness. But, you know, that's kind of what the show is about, is being comfortable with this moral gray area.
Absolutely. And I feel like every episode we do, we come to the end and we say, well, it could be like this, but ultimately it's a gray area and you have to do it by situation and you have to just try your best to apply all of the best ways you know how to be and go from there. And that's also kind of how the show is too, is keep improving. Keep doing your best to apply as much as you know to every situation, and don't be afraid to allow others to challenge you. Because a lot of time is spent with a lot of the characters challenging each other as they try to figure out the best ways out of their situation that allows them all to survive.
Yeah, and that's practical philosophy summed up, you know? You just got to keep trying new things. Got to listen to each other. Like, because you were saying earlier how the characters, especially Chidi and Eleanor, kind of talk about, you know, what do I owe the people around me? And that's the really important part of the show, too, is that we do owe something to the people in our lives.
Everyone we come across as members of the human race, we owe at least a base level of respect and love.
And if you
for.
can't get to love, then at least get to consideration, right?
Don't be love, consideration.
Yeah, we got to start somewhere. And if you can't get to consideration, then just do what Eleanor did in season 1 and just do the things that other people tell you are good, even if you don't even care that much.
And then fake it till you make it. It gets natural.
Make it. I guess at the end of the day, it's just about, we just really love this show and we really love philosophy. And it's a really great way to access philosophy in a fun, entertaining way that makes you feel a lot of emotions and makes you think. It makes you consider how you behave in your own life. And there's not a lot of media out there that you can kind of take away with you, right? So it's a really special show. If you've never seen it, give it a watch, or, you know, read the synopsis or something. And if you have seen it, good on ya. Thanks for listening today. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to join the conversation, find us on Twitter and TikTok at BTB Philosophy. We would love to hear your thoughts and suggestions. Stay curious, stay open, and stay kind. We'll talk to you next time.